Hi, and welcome to TTELT, Teaching Tips for English Language Teachers, a program of educators worldwide. I'm your host today, Melanie Gobert.
Hello, everyone. This is Melanie Gobert, your host for today's episode of TTELT podcast, Teaching Tips for English Language Teachers. Joining us today is Oshin Danish from Yamamah University, where she's an English language lecturer. Welcome, Oshin.
Thank you so much for having me, Melanie.
Her topic today is going to be input to intake in second language acquisition. Can you explain a little bit what you mean by that?
So this paper is something that we all experience as teachers, where we're constantly trying to, give some sort of an intake to the students. We're constantly giving them input. We're teaching them language. We're teaching them words. It's everything. But the main thing is whether that input is actually fructifying itself and it's becoming some sort of an intake, and whether or not the students are able to produce it in the form of an output. The reason why this paper is called Input to Intake in Second Language Acquisition is because second language acquisition is believed to go hand in hand with language classroom acquisition, and it has reached a lot of attention of researchers and teachers over the years. But the whole point is we constantly try to make sure that we are reaching or we're hitting the intake part, but we really don't know if it's happening. And sometimes it's not the teacher who's doing it. The intake only happens when a peer or when a friend or somebody who's not a teacher is telling the student or is helping the student revise. Now, within this paper, what I have discussed is are different theories, like the social interaction theory, the social cultural theory, and one of my personal favorite is zone of proximal development. And some of the key areas that I've touched upon is input, comprehensible input, noticing, output, and potential intake. So in different ways and in different areas, these things take place, and this is what my aim of this paper is. Now, if I talk about my personal favorite, zone of proximal development, we all know that when a student comes to class or whenever there's a learner, they have enough knowledge to be somewhere. And that is, where they start from. But according to Krushen and Krushen's input hypothesis, input only takes place when the student starts stepping outside of their comfort zone. And with the help of different things like memorizing, noticing, connectionism, that's when they're able to reach zone of proximal development. And it is heavily, like the social interactive theory is heavily influenced by cognitive theories, like previously mentioned. And this is where comprehensible input comes into picture.
What is comprehensible input?
Well, according to Vygotsky's social cultural theory, which is SCT, I'm really bad with the acronyms, but I like the full form. So social culture theory, it's that the society and social factors play a major role in developing a student's or a learner's learning process, is what I would say. And with that, along with ZPD, it really helps the learner generate the language through socially mediated interaction. Now, this is not just the student-teacher interaction, it's the social interaction, which means the way the students talk in the classroom, the small little tiny gossips that take place in the class, or sometimes if the student is really interested, discussing something outside the classroom with a friend or with the teacher that they like. So that is what is the whole comprehensible input part, that what the teacher teaches is not the intake, it's just the input. When and how that reaches the stage or the level that it can be called as an intake is completely dependent on the kind of culture, or not the culture, sorry, the interaction that takes place. According to Krishan's input hypothesis, this whole process of language development is a social process. And that's how this input would actually take place for the student to be able to produce anything later on. Now, with the relationship between input and language acquisition here can be associated with one of Long's research, that is the interaction theory, where it refers to that language forms through interaction. I may be teaching my students constant vocab, constant words, constant everything, but till the time they are not interacting with each other in the target language, or if they are not able to use the target language outside the classroom, it's not going to fruitify. Their researchers, specifically like Ellis, he said that input cannot be understood until and unless it is intelligible and it's understandable. So if I'm here talking to students at, let's say, an A2 level and speaking to them in an academic language level, like giving them intensive work like research or fruitify, for that matter, I've been using this too much today, or negotiating, they will not understand it because it's not understandable, and they're not able to they won't know where to use it. So this is where the whole thing comes down to, that yes, input is undeniably required for learning, but if there is no intake, that input does not work. And that comes down to the fact that input and cognition work hand to hand, work together, in hand rather. Because if there is no cognition, there is no speaking happening, there is no there is no comprehension, there'll be no cognition. Like for example, if I speak to you in any other language but English that you aren't aware of, I might just go on and on and on. You as a language teacher might be able to understand or grasp a few words, but you won't know where to use them. So that is probably just input, but there's no intake till the time you don't speak. And the whole information processing and input comes down to three major processes. Input, which is the perception; interaction, which is the processing; and then comes the output, which is the production. So this is the whole thing so far. Constant input is not always comprehensible. Like even now, if I am talking about this topic, till the time somebody doesn't really understand these names or these concepts, they will not be able to understand the whole point. So comprehensible input is potential intake. So there is a potential, but you're not too sure. And then for input to become proper intake or potential intake, you need noticing, you need elements like attention to detail. And I believe those two things are very necessary. That's something we as language teachers also see in classrooms. And that's when you have different processing stages, where you have short-term memory, long-term memory, information processing, and how well you were able to do it. Is there any kind of negotiation? Are you using some kind of acronym? All of those things. And then we come down to output.
Okay, so what is the relationship between information processing and input and students' output?
Well, like I previously mentioned, with regards to information processing and input, there is a full three-step process. They need to have input, they need to have interaction, and with interaction, I don't mean just using specific controlled sentences. Like, okay, you're going to talk about an apple today. Use apple in different forms or words. No, it should be a natural interaction among students. And then finally comes the production stage, which is the output process. Now, with output, the theory that I have discussed or have spoken about is Swain's output theory, which discusses the importance of an output. And it also suggests that what triggers an output is what is your memory, long term mostly, not just short term. then your noticing, and your metalinguistic reflections, how you're able to reflect what you've learned so far. And again, cognition, I think cognition is something that goes on in the background the whole time. So I think all in all, what we can understand is that for a learner, not just any specific student, but for a learner to be able to produce any kind of output, they need to interact, and interaction does not simply take place in a classroom. I know as teachers, it is difficult for us to digest that and difficult for us to comprehend it. But the reality of situation is what I think even as teachers, what you and I have learned outside of classrooms or while discussing with our peers, we remember that more than what we've just heard of in class. Because hearing, yes, you need to hear, only then can you speak. Like in a listening class, you tell them, you listen and then you speak. But till you don't understand anything, the listening is just like noise to your ear. And by the end of everything, it comes down to your neurolinguistic abilities, that you require to enable the cognitive process. And that is what my topic has been: input to intake in second language acquisition.
Okay, thank you very much, Oshin. Thank you so much for joining us today for today's episode of TTELT podcast. This has been your host, Melanie Gobert. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us today. Share with us how you are using these tips. Leave us a comment or voice message on social media or at ttelt.org. Thanks for joining this episode of TTELT, brought to you by educators worldwide. Follow, like, and subscribe to TTELT on your social media, and try a new teaching tip today.